In the bottom of the eighth of Game 2 of the 2022 NLDS, the Dodgers and the Padres got an unexpected visitor. While the Dodgers tried to mount a rally to go up 2-0 in the series, a goose flew down and made itself at home on the outfield grass. Gavin Lux got a base hit on the very next pitch, which only added to the drama of the actual situation. But that didn't stop the commentators from getting more than a little distracted by their new friend.
I'm sorry. I know this is an intense playoff game. We're having a blast calling it, but I cannot help but laugh at this moment.
The Goose drew a lot of attention, but unfortunately for the Dodgers, not enough attention to keep Josh Hader and the Padres from getting out of the inning unscathed. The bird was eventually corralled, humanely of course, but ultimately, so were the Dodgers, both in that game and the next one. And the next one, losing them the series in 4 games. From the time that the Goose made its appearance, the team that won 111 games in the regular season lost 3 in a row, ending what a lot of people thought was going to be a run to the World Series. As they are wont to do, both fans and the media came to the only logical conclusion about those two things happening at the same time. This wasn't just any old goose that landed in Dodger Stadium that night. Not anymore, anyway. This goose was cursed. Curses actually have a long and storied history in the minds and hearts of sports fans. Going all the way back to Dante Culpepper in 2002, the Madden curse has been haunting players who've appeared on the cover of the iconic video game at a remarkably consistent rate. Michael Vick, Donovan McNabb, Sean Alexander, Vince Young, and Peyton Hillis, among others, all had significant injuries or drops in production in the years after being put on the cover of Madden. I'm not a big NASCAR guy, but I am from Alabama, where Talladega Superspeedway is one of the biggest sporting attractions in the entire state, literally. And it's also cursed, apparently. There are curses and jinxes and hoodoos and a bunch of other sports too, but in this country, there's one game in particular that has a very strong history with the mystical arts. Baseball people, and very much including myself in this, are just kind of weird for a number of reasons, but chief among them is that a lot of them are incredibly superstitious. If a pitcher is 4 or 5 innings into his start and hasn't allowed anyone to get on base, it's highly encouraged that you not say anything about it, especially not to him. If a bat has gotten you a few hits, then you've obviously got to keep using it, because it's lucky. And if the opposite is true, well, sorry about it, but sacrifices have to be made. Rally caps, not stepping on the foul line, doing the same routine every time you step into the batter's box, all of these things are done to circumvent bad juju, but sometimes it just isn't enough. Sometimes you don't want a pennant for the better part of a century and blame it on a billy goat, or on Steve Bartman. Occasionally, you build a building too high and think that's the reason you haven't won a championship for 2 decades. And if you're the Red Sox, you take it to an entirely new level. This is a real HBO documentary produced in 2003 about the curse of the Bambino, an hour-long TV special detailing all of the ways that Babe Ruth's curse screwed the Red Sox over. And it's really something.
There is something mystical about this franchise.
Something was working against them, something beyond the control and the understanding of anybody.
There is some kind of a curse. All these things cannot be coincidences.
Yeah, we are all of 90 seconds into this show, which, just for the record, won an Emmy for Outstanding Sports Documentary, and we're already getting a feel for just how thoroughly wigged out this fan base had gotten. Dennis Leary is in this, talking about how Red Sox owner Harry Frazee sold Babe Ruth to the Yankees so he could finance the production of the musical No No Nanette, which isn't true, of course. The musical wouldn't be a thing until several years after Babe Ruth was traded to New York, but if you're going to believe that there's an actual curse that's been put on your team, why wouldn't you believe some of the lore that goes along with it? I know I'm kind of giving away what I think about all this already, but there are a lot of people who really do take this kind of thing really seriously. Seriously enough for HBO to be able to make an hour's worth of content about it and put it on TV. Wait, really? Ben Affleck is in this?
For more than 100 years, the Boston Red Sox, my team, have been the most interesting in baseball.
Okay, wow, yeah, that's really him. If I had HBO's budget, I would probably get Ben Affleck to do my voiceovers too. Keep in mind that this was produced in 2003, at which point the Red Sox had been World Series lists for nearly 90 years, but it's worth listening to just how fatalistic people in Boston were about all this.
In the year 2018, it'll be 100 years since they won their last championship. They're going to study what every team in sports has done, because by 2018, every single team in sports will have won a championship: hockey, baseball, football, basketball, soccer, except the Red Sox. So they'll make a study of this thing. Then they'll take the report that they paid a consultant hundreds of thousands of dollars for, they'll take it and they'll stick it in a drawer and they'll not read it. It's funny in one sense, but in another sense, to those that take it really serious, it's a tragedy.
Let me just stop you right there, Eddie Anselman, because there are a couple of pretty big problems with your theory there, namely that by 2018, not only had the Red Sox won a championship, but they had, in fact, won 4 in the span of about 15 years. The irony of this documentary coming out in September 2003, just about a month before the Red Sox would lose in heartbreaking fashion to guess who, the Yankees in the ALCS, is that the next season was 2004. 2004, the year that David Ortiz and Curt Schilling and the Boston Red Sox finally won the thing. This movie was barely a year old before the curse it spent almost 60 minutes describing was completely and thoroughly broken, all at the expense of the very team that Babe Ruth was traded to all those years ago. You probably already know this, but it is overwhelmingly unlikely that there ever actually was a mystical force compelling bad things to happen to the Red Sox, or the Cubs, or the guys on the cover of Madden, or anyone else for that matter. But that doesn't mean that curses aren't real, in a certain sense anyway. As fans, we tend to struggle bridging the gap between how we feel about our teams and the results those teams actually produce. And no one is immune to this. At some point, you're going to have to account for the difference in your brain between my team is the best and my team just lost. And in those moments, we become very vulnerable to believing in things that do not make any sense. This is an example of what's known as an ego defense mechanism. But to explain that further, we're going to have to take a couple steps back. This is Sigmund Freud, who there's a good chance you've probably heard of at some point, but may not know exactly why. And that's absolutely fine, because Freud died a super long time ago, and in addition to not really being all that scientifically rigorous, a lot of what he put in his books was real weird. But one of Freud's biggest and most resilient contributions was something called the structural model of personality, which basically said that you could boil human behavior and motivation down to 3 distinct categories: the id, ego, and superego. The theory goes that the id and superego are polar opposites, and that the ego is constantly having to settle disputes between them to decide what you should actually do in a given situation. For example, if you're at work and your id wants you to say, watch a video from your favorite sports psychology YouTube channel, your superego will probably counter by reminding you that you're supposed to be working. It's sort of like a more academic version of the angel and devil on your shoulders, but eventually, you have to choose which one you're going to listen to. And if you root for a sports team, you want them to win, always. That's the nature of the exercise, but unfortunately, even if your team is usually really good, that doesn't always happen. Your id desires the team to be successful, but in the event that they aren't, your superego has to be the bad guy and remind you that they have not, in fact, managed to do that. And when your desires and reality don't match up, your brain is forced to come up with something called the ego defense mechanism, or a way to account for the difference between the two. This can include something like denial, where you just out and out refuse to accept the reality, repression, where you force the memory of that failure into your subconscious, projection, where you attribute your feelings to someone else, or displacement, where your id's desires are taken out on a non-threatening victim. But sometimes, we can get pretty creative with these things, and with the facts, and indulge in something called rationalization, which sounds very good and logical, but is actually the exact opposite. When reality is difficult for us to accept, we sometimes invent a new one, like if we get fired at a job and blame it on the boss not liking us, or blame a teacher for our bad test grade when we definitely didn't study. Or if our favorite team hasn't won in a really long time, we might create a convenient reason for that doesn't have anything to do with the reality on the field. And I'm certainly not immune to this. Until 2021, my favorite baseball team, the Braves, had only won 1 World Series in each of the 3 cities they'd played in. So naturally, my fan brain told me that there was some sort of curse on the team, and my mostly joking but also sort of serious solution was just for them to move cities every single year to eliminate that as a variable. I know intellectually that there probably isn't a curse, but shoot, I ain't about to mess around and find out if I don't have to. From there, it becomes a very straightforward case of confirmation bias. Instead of exploring the nuances and multiple potential variables that might have led up to Bucky Dent's home run or the ball rolling between Bill Buckner's legs, all evidence can just be funneled into the idea that your team is cursed, and all evidence to the contrary can just be ignored. And this probably sounds like it doesn't make a ton of sense, but that's the point. Part of the beauty of being a sports fan is being at least a little irrational in the support of your team, but that can also make us susceptible to lines of thought that we would otherwise not even entertain, like thinking that a particular referee is out to get us, or that there's a league-wide conspiracy against your team for whatever reason. Believing in curses highlights the fact that being a sports fan is a lot more emotional than it is intellectual, but ironically, doing so makes the curse, and I'm putting that word in scare quotes by the way more real than it would be otherwise. Believing that your team is haunted for whatever reason creates the opportunity for a self-fulfilling prophecy, which can have actual effects on the field. Expectations are an incredibly important part of the culture of a team, and if you're someone like the Chicago Cubs, and you've been known for a big chunk of your history as the lovable losers, at least in part because of a supposed curse, then that establishes a precedent for a pattern of behavior. The narrative around the team may make free agents less likely to sign there, or just cause the players to lose belief in themselves. The real power of a curse has nothing to do with the supernatural, but with our own completely natural vulnerability to narrative and association. At a very deep level, we need things to be explained, but when the logical explanation doesn't line up with what we believe or feel, then there's a good chance that we'll just invent one. We could say that the Dodgers got knocked out by the Padres because they went 2 for 26 with runners in scoring position in the games they lost. We could even be generous and blame the layoff that the team had during the wildcard series. Or, if we really don't want to accept that their team just lost, we could blame it all on a goose. Sorry, a cursed goose. Hey everybody, I'm Will, and I'm so glad you're here to experience this spooky season video with us. So many fan bases have a curse that they believe has hurt their team's fortunes over the years, so if you're a part of one of those, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Curses aren't real in the cosmic sense, but they also totally are in the way that people experience them, and they're just kind of fun to talk about. If you enjoyed the content, please do give it a like and even subscribe to the channel for more stuff like it. Fall is my absolute favorite time of year on the sports calendar, with both NFL and college football, Premier League, and the NBA season all going on at the same time. And the World Series, which will probably be the subject of our next video. Until then though, I'm Will. Thanks for watching.